My name's Adam Jones. I'm formerly a PhD student, but now a PhD holder from University of Southern California. I first found out about it actually in 2015. The collaborator and I were working with sleep data from the VA in Houston, and unfortunately, the data set wasn't very large. So we were having issues with not enough diversity in the quality of the data and in the subjects that we had. And so I went searching for something out there. I have no idea when NSRR first got online, but I stumbled upon it and immediately started applying to get as many of the data sets as possible so that we could get as much diversity in the subjects that we had. My work that was recently published is a neural network, a deep neural network that scores sleep using just the ECG or EKG channel of the NSRR data. The whole point of why this research was actually started was because one, I had been actually studying what's called heart rate variability for things like meditation, et cetera, in the years preceding it, and realized that, hey, there seems to be a lot more data in what's called the autonomic nervous system than it looks like people are giving credit for. And this, in the middle of these kind of experiments on myself, actually, I found that, hey, there seems to be these time periods throughout the night that I see my heart either beating very rhythmically or more monotonously. And decided to go see, okay, is it possible to do this with sleep staging? I had to learn all about it, et cetera. And using, like I said, just the ECG channel, we're able to score sleep. So take an entire recording the night. So like whenever, if the recording began like, an hour before the subject fell asleep or immediately when the subject fell asleep, et cetera, and all the way to the very end of the recording, whenever that happened, taking that, it also uses the subject's age and sex. Sorry, I should mention that as well. It then produces a sleep label for every one of the 30-second epochs. And this was trained and evaluated on NSRR data. So actually 5 data sets were used for the final model: the CCSHS, CFS, CHAT, MESA, and WSC. And that gave us a really broad range from subjects from 5 to 90 years old. With the training and evaluation, we could compare this against the expert polysomnography scores that were already provided by NSRR. So that allowed us to verify that. The one interesting thing that has to be done is because some of these data sets were collected before the new standard AASM became popular. The previous standard was used, and there are some differences between them, but the network has to kind of do its best to harmonize between, let's say, for instance, N2 and S2, which was the original name for the stage. Again, there are some differences, but it seems to work out well. For clinical, this is actually something that in the years that I've been developing this, and my collaborator, I've been developing this, I've been presenting the iterative process of this at the Society for Neuroscience conference over the years. And so it's been helpful to have meetings, one-on-one discussions with people who have come by either to my talks or to my posters and get a sense of kind of what they could do with this, et cetera. And so one thing that we found universally of those who seem to be interested is that one, polysomnography is really, really difficult to collect. Either they have to come into a clinic or they have to take a lot of the equipment home and sleep with that. The caps are a pain in the butt, et cetera. And so again, from discussion with other clinicians, et cetera, it seems like this could be really useful for vastly increasing the amount of sleep studies medicine that's being done right now. So for instance, we're aware of researchers who have been looking at, for instance, clinical evaluation of subjects. And unfortunately, that's just not possible right now, just due to the time and cost, et cetera, and cumbersomeness of the PSG. So maybe they could bring a subject in for a study once a year or something like that. But what if they're trying a new medication, or they want to see more time points? Because as all scientists know, you take one snapshot and that may tell you something, but the problem is that could have also been a good day or a bad day. And you may not know how that trend line is actually changing unless you're collecting more data than that. So this could really give an advantage to both researchers and clinicians to collecting a lot more data on this subject. And then for not just clinicians, researchers, but also for citizen scientists. So right now, I, like a lot of people, am tracking sleep. I'm using Oura Ring. And the only reason why I have this is because I just didn't have time during my PhD to develop the equipment that I was going to use to just record my ECG. This opens up the ability for citizen scientists to get much more accurate sleep staging. Now, what they can do with that we still have to find out. I mean, that's the biggest question that I had during my defense, and then tons of conversations I've had with people over the years is, okay, well, what can we do with this information? And unfortunately, there isn't a lot of knowledge yet of like what is actionable. Some people ask like, hey, like, should I be trying to bias more REM sleep, or should I be trying to bias more deep sleep? And there seems to be evidence for no, that really it's a balance of all of those. Different types of memory are consolidated in different sleep. Emotional regulation is highly important to having a sufficient REM sleep, et cetera. And it's not so much that we should be optimizing for like, hey, I want just 100% REM sleep and that will be the best sleep. But being able to track this will definitely give researchers and hopefully citizen scientists more ability to go, okay, well, now that we can track this, let's say on a more granular basis, weekly, daily, et cetera, what can we find in this data that's actionable, that can change people's lives in some way? Definitely find, I mean, the process, you guys make it really, really simple to get the data. It's actually slightly easier if you aren't part of an institution than you are part of an institution, just because of the additional IRB approval, et cetera. But one thing I would definitely recommend to people is if there's more than one data set that they're interested in, because it has a particular patient population, let's say they're looking for older subjects, and there's several of those. There's the SSH data set, there's MROS, there's MESA, there's WSC, and there's a fair amount of variability in the data sets, not only in the quality of the data. For instance, we actually don't use the SHHS data set because we found that there isn't a step that's actually mentioned in the documentation. The ECG data is actually fairly degraded by the device that was used to store the data. And so, whereas other data sets, I think CHAT, for instance, I think has a really high sampling rate and a very, very high floating point resolution of the ECG data. So it provides really, really accurate ability to do further downstream analysis. So things like that, looking for like what patient population, but also what quality of data they need. I'll be honest that because we are only looking at ECG data, although I didn't throw away all of the EEG data, because the original files still exist, I never compared between the data sets, like which electrodes are being used for which data sets, et cetera. So that's something I would recommend anyone who's using it. And then just be aware that even if you find a couple data sets, let's say you want to work between two data sets, there will be some differences in how the naming of the channels happens, the data that's stored. I think NSRR has done a great job for most of the data sets, for most of the large data sets, on harmonizing, let's say, the subject ID so that there's a unique way to track which subjects, et cetera. But there's room for improvement, and I just want people to be aware that the more data you work with among SRR, the more kind of edge cases you'll find. And if people just spend just a few minutes kind of on a little bit of cleanup, they'll be able to take a lot more of the data and use it. I'm sure you guys are doing this, but to anyone listening to this, if you have data out there that you've been collecting as far as studies, definitely get it to NSRR. And hopefully a cleaned up form. I have seen some data sets collected that I would assume if they've submitted to NSRR that it's going to take NSRR a long time to actually harmonize them with all of the other data sets. But the larger that repository, I think the better, because just like the whole impetus for my research is that for more people, more healthy conditions, more unhealthy conditions, more data points, I think getting more data collected is just going to be a boon for everyone. And so having a centralized repository like this would be great for people to submit their files to, et cetera. I personally, in the labs I've worked with, we haven't been collecting sleep data. We've only been using already collected data. But it would be interesting to find out if in the future NSRR would be interested in collecting sleep data that doesn't have all the EEG complements. So as we coined cardiosonography, so just sleep studies that just have ECG, because I feel like not just harmonizing those, but having a repository where all of those are there, I think could be useful.